Did you give him food, Carl? The manager snapped sharply. Ethan nodded, heart pounding, sweat prickling his back. Then you're fired. No one spoke. Only the old homeless man turned his eyes tired, yet deep like the ocean, as if carrying stories no one had asked to hear. The next morning, 6 military Humvees rumbled into the gas station lot. A Marine Corps officer stepped out, his uniform gleaming with metal's boots, hitting the pavement with purpose. He raised his hand in a sharp salute, not to a general, not to a politician, but to Ethan, the gas station worker. Who was that old man by the dumpster? And what kind of man could bring a battlefield hero to bow his head in respect? To someone the world had overlooked, Ethan Miller had never imagined his life would lead to the dim glow of a gas station's night shift. Growing up in a small town outside Orlando, Florida, Ethan had always been the kid with a notebook in his pocket, scribbling down stories and interviewing anyone who would talk to him, from the local baker to his high school janitor. His dream was clear: to become a reporter, to tell the stories that mattered, and to give voice to those who went unheard. By the time he enrolled at the University of Florida, he was well on his way. Ethan threw himself into journalism classes, balancing a 3.9 GPA with long hours at the student paper. He was passionate, tireless, and hopeful. His professors saw in him a spark, and his classmates often joked that Ethan would be the one they'd see reporting on national news within a few years. But life has a way of rewriting dreams without warning. When Ethan was in his junior year, his father Mark was diagnosed with ALS, a progressive and unforgiving disease. A former construction foreman, Mark had been Ethan's hero, a man of quiet strength whose hands could build a house and whose laugh could fill a room. Watching his father's body betray him was a heartbreak Ethan could never have prepared for. At first, Ethan tried to juggle it all, racing between classes, study sessions, and weekend trips home to help. But soon the trips became longer, the calls more urgent, and the responsibilities heavier. His grades slipped, his internships fell away, and eventually Ethan made the painful decision to leave school altogether. He packed up his dreams and came home to be a full-time caregiver. For 2 years, Ethan became his father's hands and feet, feeding him, lifting him, comforting him on the darkest nights. When Mark passed away, Ethan was left not just grieving, but broke with student debt and no degree to show for it. Many people saw Ethan at the gas station and assumed they knew his story. Another kid who never made it out of town, working a dead-end job with no ambition. But they never saw the years of sacrifice, the heartache, or the love that pulled him away from his path. That's the thing about ordinary workers: their hidden struggles, the burdens they carry, without fanfare, the dreams they put on hold for family. Ethan's life, like so many others, was a quiet testimony to the resilience and quiet heroism that too often goes unseen. And though his dreams had been delayed, they were far from gone. The night air was colder than usual for Florida, sharp enough to sting Ethan Miller's face as he pushed open the back door of the gas station. His breath formed pale clouds in the dim glow of the overhead light. As he tossed a bag of trash into the dumpster, movement in the corner of his eye made him pause. There, huddled against the brick wall, was an elderly man, his gray beard tangled and his thin frame wrapped in layers of mismatched clothing. His shoes were patched with duct tape, and his trembling hands fumbled with a crumpled plastic bread bag he'd salvaged from the trash. Under the flicker of the street lamp, the man's eyes were fixed on the stubborn packaging, desperate to get to a few scraps of stale bread. Ethan froze. He knew the rules. Carl, the manager, had drilled it into every employee's head. No handouts. No free coffee. We're not a charity. Last year, an employee had been fired for giving a sandwich to someone outside. But as Ethan stood there, his heart began to pound. This wasn't a man asking for money or harassing customers. This was a man trying to survive, clutching garbage to quiet his hunger. Ethan's mind raced. He could walk back inside, pretend he hadn't seen anything, keep his job safe. Or he could break the rules. He turned without a word, slipping inside. The store was silent except for the low hum of the refrigerator units. Ethan brewed a fresh pot of coffee, made a turkey sandwich from the deli case, and grabbed an old fleece jacket from his locker. One by one, he rang them up at the register, swiping his own debit card, pocketing the receipt. As he stepped back into the cold, the man was still there, fingers shaking, face etched with weariness. "Sir," Ethan said quietly, kneeling down. "I thought you might want something warm." The old man looked up, surprise and caution flickering in his eyes. "I can't pay you, son. It's already taken care of, Ethan. murmured, placing the items gently on the ground and stepping back. In that moment, Ethan felt the weight of something larger. Society had trained people to look away to pass by the homeless, the hungry, the invisible. We scroll past tragedy on our phones, walk past suffering on the street, tell ourselves it's someone else's problem. But in that cold, quiet exchange between two strangers, Ethan pushed back against that numbness. And in doing so, he unknowingly set a ripple in motion that would change both of their lives forever. The sharp jingle of keys announced Carl Benson's arrival before Ethan even saw him. The silver BMW screeched into the gas station lot, headlights glaring like a pair of cold eyes. Ethan's stomach sank as Carl's heavy footsteps approached from behind. Carl didn't waste time. "Did you give him food?" he snapped, voice cutting through the stillness. Ethan turned, heart-pounding sweat creeping down his back despite the cold night. His throat was dry, but he forced himself to nod. "I paid for it myself," Ethan added quickly, pulling the receipt from his pocket like a shield. Carl snatched it, barely glancing. "We have rules for a reason, Ethan. You think you're doing him a favor? But all you're doing is making this place a magnet for every stray in the county." Ethan's jaw tightened. He was just trying to eat Carl. Carl's face hardened. "That's not your call. You're here to run the register, not save the world." The words stung, but Ethan stood firm. "I didn't do it to save the world. I did it because it was the right thing to do." For a split second, Carl seemed taken aback, but it passed quickly, replaced by the familiar mask of corporate authority. "Then you're done here," Carl said flatly, pulling a termination form from his clipboard. "Finish your shift. Don't come back." As Carl walked away, Ethan felt the tremble in his hands, the ache in his chest. But beneath the fear and disappointment, something else flickered: quiet resolve. He had known the risk, weighed it carefully, and chosen to act anyway. And though the consequences were harsh, Ethan felt no regret. It was a familiar pattern in places like this: policies and procedures wrapped tightly around the heart of a business, squeezing out any space for compassion. Rules kept operations smooth, costs low, and managers like Carl in control. But they also created a kind of moral blindness, turning employees into cogs in a machine that valued efficiency over humanity. Ethan understood that Carl wasn't a villain. He was a man trained to see the world through numbers, to keep the store profitable, to prevent disruptions. But Ethan also knew that when we let rules choke out kindness, we start to lose something essential: the ability to recognize the dignity in each other. As the hours dragged on toward morning, Ethan worked in silence, the memory of the old man's eyes, tired yet grateful, carrying him through. Even as his job slipped away, his sense of rightness remained unshaken. By mid-afternoon, Ethan's phone buzzed on the kitchen counter, where it had sat silent all morning. He'd been trying to shake off the weight of the night, filling out job applications between sips of lukewarm coffee. When the unfamiliar number lit up, he hesitated before answering. "Hello, is this Ethan Miller?" a calm, professional voice asked. "Yes, this is Ethan," he said cautiously. "This is Monica Reyes. I'm with Veterans Affairs. I was hoping we could speak for a few minutes." Ethan's brow furrowed. "Veterans Affairs, I think you have the wrong person." "I don't believe so," Monica replied gently. "I understand you assisted an individual outside your workplace last night." Ethan's chest tightened. He thought back to the old man by the dumpster. Could this really be connected? "I didn't do much," Ethan murmured. He was cold, hungry. "I just gave him a sandwich and a jacket." There was a pause on the line. "That act meant more than you realize," Monica said. "The man you helped was not just another person on the street. He's someone our department has been trying to locate for months." Ethan's pulse quickened. "Who is he? I'd like to explain that in person," Monica said. "Can you meet me at our Tampa office tomorrow morning?" As Ethan ended the call, a strange swirl of confusion and unease settled over him. He had seen many people come and go outside the gas station, drifters, runaways, and travelers down on their luck. But there had been something about that old man, something that lingered in Ethan's memory: the quiet dignity in his eyes, the way he'd offered a perfect, almost reflexive salute before disappearing into the dark. It made Ethan realize just how easy it is to overlook people on the margins. We pass by veterans every day, sitting on park benches, sleeping under bridges, clutching cardboard signs at intersections. Once they wore uniforms, bore the weight of duty, carried the pride of service. Now they often walk invisible among us, their struggles drowned out by the noise of busy lives. Ethan thought of his own father's battle with ALS, how quickly people's sympathy faded when the disease stole away his voice. The old man at the gas station wasn't just another face on the street. He was someone's father, someone's brother, someone who had once stood strong until life knocked him down. As the sun dipped toward the horizon, Ethan understood something had shifted. What he thought was just a small moment of kindness was now unraveling into something far larger, and he was right at the center of it. The morning unfolded like a scene from a movie. Ethan had barely slept, his mind racing through the strange phone call with Monica Reyes. As he sipped his coffee, trying to gather his thoughts, the sound of engines rumbled outside. He stepped onto the front porch just in time to see 6 Humvees roll down his quiet street, tires crunching over the asphalt. Neighbors peered through curtains. A few ventured onto porches, phones already raised to capture the moment. The convoy turned its destination clear. At the gas station where Ethan had worked just hours ago, the Humvees pulled into the lot with military precision. Passers-by froze mid-pump, wide-eyed, as uniformed Marines filed out in sharp formation. The commanding figure at the center, Brigadier General Samuel Harris, stood tall, his chest gleaming with rows of medals, his expression calm but purposeful. By the time Ethan arrived, the small gas station had transformed into the center of public attention. Reporters, curious onlookers, and nervous employees gathered outside whispering theories. Social media had already exploded videos of the Humvee, snapshots of the Marines, hashtags like Wash Gas Station Hero and Marines in Tampa trending within hours. General Harris stood inside the store speaking quietly with Monica Reyes and a few stiff-looking corporate executives. When Ethan entered, the general turned his gaze steady but kind. "You must be Ethan Miller," Harris said, extending his hand. Ethan shook it cautiously, still trying to comprehend the gravity of the moment. "Yes, sir, but I'm just a gas station attendant." "Not today, you're not," the general replied with a faint smile. "Today you're the man who helped bring home one of our own." Ethan's stomach flipped. "Who was he?" Major General Walter Green, Harris said quietly. "A decorated officer retired after a traumatic brain injury. He wandered from his care facility months ago. We searched, we posted alerts, but it was your simple act of kindness that finally brought him home." Ethan's throat tightened. The memory of the old man's quiet dignity, the salute, the fading figure in the dark, it all came rushing back with new weight. Harris continued, his voice firm yet thoughtful. "It's easy to think systems are what change the world, big organizations, policies, laws. But sometimes all it takes is one person doing the right thing when no one's watching. That's what cuts through red tape, what reminds people of their humanity." Ethan looked around. The store where he had stocked shelves and mopped floors was now a stage for something extraordinary. People who once barely noticed his presence were now filming his every move, their faces filled with awe. The Marines hadn't come for punishment or spectacle. They had come to honor a moment that society often overlooks, a quiet decision made in the cold when no one was watching. As Ethan stood there, he realized something profound. Compassion has the power to challenge even the most rigid systems. Rules can be rewritten. Corporations can change course. And all it takes sometimes is one small act of decency to remind everyone what really matters. Ethan stood near the gas station pump, squinting under the bright midday sun, feeling awkward in the center of a crowd he never imagined would gather for him. Just a day ago, he was a faceless night shift worker, a young man who most customers barely glanced at while buying coffee or lottery tickets. Now a podium had been set up near the store, flanked by military flags, microphones, and camera crews. Brigadier General Samuel Harris approached the microphone, his voice clear and strong as it carried across the lot. "Ladies and gentlemen, today we recognize that heroism often comes in the quietest forms," he said, pausing as murmurs rippled through the crowd. "Ethan Miller, with no obligation, no recognition, and at the cost of his job, chose to help a man in need. That man happened to be one of our own, Major General Walter Green. But that's not why Ethan's act matters. It matters because Ethan didn't know, and he helped anyway." Ethan's cheeks flushed as the general gestured for him to step forward. Applause erupted, startling in its force. His legs felt heavy as he walked toward the small platform, his heart thudding as if it might burst through his chest. General Harris pinned a medal to Ethan's shirt, a civilian service medal gleaming gold against the fabric. Ethan barely heard the citation read aloud. His mind raced with disbelief. He hadn't set out to make a statement to challenge rules or to gain attention. He had simply seen a man who was cold and hungry, and he acted. Standing under the weight of the applause, he struggled to reconcile the noise, the cameras, and the swelling headlines with the quiet, personal moment he had shared with an old man in the dark. When Ethan finally spoke, his voice was soft, almost swallowed by the breeze. "I didn't know who he was," he admitted to the crowd. "I didn't think of this as anything heroic. I just thought if it were me or my dad or anyone I cared about, I'd want someone to stop and care." What struck Ethan most was how many people now praise something so simple: a sandwich, a coffee, a jacket, and a moment of human connection. It made him reflect on all the unseen acts of goodness that happen every day. The nurse who stays past her shift, the teacher who buys a student lunch, the neighbor who checks on someone's aging parent. None of them make headlines, yet they are the quiet stitching that holds society together. True heroism, Ethan realized, often goes unnoticed. It doesn't come with medals or ceremonies. It's the choice to act when it's easier to look away, the choice to see another's humanity when the world tells you to keep moving. As the cameras flashed and the reporters shouted his name, Ethan felt a mix of humility and resolve. He hadn't just stumbled into a viral moment, he had stumbled into a deeper truth that quiet, ordinary acts of care hold extraordinary power. Carl Benson had never been a man to apologize. For years, he ran the gas station with strict efficiency. Rules were rules, and kindness in his mind was a slippery slope to chaos. He prided himself on keeping things in order, on hitting targets, on making sure no one cut corners. To Carl, there was a right way to do things, and sentimentality had no place in a business. But after the media storm, after the Humvees rolled away and the headlines cooled, Carl was left standing in a quiet, near-empty store, staring at the spot where Ethan had once brewed coffee, where customers now lingered just a little longer, whispering about the kid who made a difference. And for the first time in a long time, Carl felt something he couldn't brush aside: shame. He had fired a man for helping someone. He hadn't even paused to ask why. The first time Carl approached Ethan, it was at the Veterans Center that had been set up in partnership with the gas station chain, now rebranded as Patriot Stop. Carl walked in wearing his usual button-down and polished shoes, awkward and out of place among the relaxed crowd of veterans, drinking free coffee, laughing and sharing stories. Ethan looked up from a folding table where he was helping sort supplies. Their eyes met, and for a moment Carl thought about turning around and walking right back out. But he didn't. Carl cleared his throat, shifting uncomfortably. "I was wondering if you needed another pair of hands?" Ethan gave him a long, measured look, not angry, not smug, just quiet. Then he offered a simple nod. "Sure, Carl. We can use the help." At first, Carl fumbled setting out chairs, organizing donation bins, pouring coffee with a heavy hand. He was stiff, clumsy, overly formal. But over the weeks, something softened. He sat down and listened to stories from veterans, learned their names, heard about their families, their losses, their triumphs. Slowly, the man who once ran his store like a drill sergeant began to understand something Ethan had known all along: people matter more than policies. Carl's apologies came in small ways, not big speeches. It was in staying late to help clean up, in driving a veteran to a doctor's appointment, in showing up again and again, not because a camera was watching, but because his heart had shifted. Personal growth, Carl learned, is rarely a lightning strike. It's a series of small, sometimes awkward steps: choosing to show up when you don't have to listen when it's easier to walk away, to admit when you were wrong, and do the work to make it right. Redemption, like heroism, often happens in the quiet places. And over time, Carl wasn't just earning back Ethan's respect, he was rediscovering his own humanity. The transformation of the little gas station on the corner was nothing short of remarkable. What was once a forgettable quick stop, a place where commuters grabbed coffee, snacks, and gas without a second glance, had become something entirely new. Patriot Stop, a hub dedicated to serving and honoring veterans in the community. Bright banners hung proudly over the entrance, and a new sign welcomed all veterans: "Come in, coffee's on us." Inside, one corner had been redesigned into a cozy lounge with comfortable chairs, military service flags on the wall, and a bookshelf stacked with donated novels, military history, and local newspapers. A bulletin board offered resources on job opportunities, counseling services, and upcoming veteran events. But the most remarkable change wasn't the decor. It was the spirit inside the place. Customers lingered longer. Regulars struck up conversations with veterans they once would have walked past without a second glance. Volunteers, including Carl Benson himself, helped run donation drives for winter coats and care packages. It was no longer just a gas station. It had become a gathering place, a small but powerful reminder that no one should be invisible. At the heart of it all was Ethan Miller. After the media attention faded and the applause died down, Ethan was faced with a choice. For the first time in a long while, doors were open to him. Job offers had poured in, some from companies hoping to ride the wave of his sudden fame, others from nonprofit organizations wanting his help. But Ethan knew exactly where his heart pulled him. With the help of a local scholarship fund set up by community members, Ethan returned to school to finish his journalism degree. But he didn't walk away from the gas station. Instead, he worked part-time overseeing the veteran outreach program that had been born from a simple act of kindness. Ethan coordinated events at Patriot Stop, helped connect veterans with services, and even launched a blog where he wrote about the people he met, stories of service resilience and community. He discovered that journalism wasn't just about headlines and bylines. It was about listening, amplifying the voices that too often went unheard, and reminding people of the power of ordinary lives. There was something profound in how the Patriot Stop model rippled beyond its walls. Other local businesses took notice. The diner down the street began offering veterans discounts. A nearby barber started hosting free haircut days for former service members. The community was awakening to the quiet truth that compassion doesn't need to be a one-time headline. It can be woven into the everyday fabric of life, creating sustainable kindness. Ethan came to realize isn't about grand gestures or viral moments. It's about building systems and spaces where empathy is part of the culture, where helping one another isn't an exception, but an expectation. It's easy to be cynical, to believe the world is too divided or indifferent to change. But standing in the center of the transformed gas station, watching a young Marine and an elderly Vietnam veteran laugh over steaming cups of coffee, Ethan understood something simple and enduring. One act of kindness can spark a movement, but it's the commitment to keep showing up that makes it last. As we reach the end of Ethan's story, we're reminded that the simplest acts of kindness can leave the most lasting impact. In today's fast-paced, often divided America, it's easy to get swept up in news cycles, political debates, and personal struggles, but sometimes it's the quiet, everyday choices we make that show the true heart of our communities. Ethan's decision to help a stranger wasn't about politics, money, or recognition. It was about dignity, about seeing someone's humanity when the world looked away. And that lesson speaks powerfully to modern life. When we choose to care, we push back against indifference. We remind ourselves that goodness still has a place, whether it's helping a neighbor, standing up for what's right, or simply showing patience in a world that rushes past. But here's the question I want to leave you with. What would you have done in Ethan's place? And even more importantly, when was the last time you reached out to someone in need just because you could? I invite you to share your thoughts and stories in the comments below. Have you ever witnessed or offered a small act of kindness that made a big difference? Or do you believe kindness can really change systems and communities? Or is it just a temporary ripple? Thank you for watching and spending time with this story. If it touched you or sparked reflection, please give this video a like, subscribe to the channel for more meaningful stories, and share it with someone who needs a reminder that compassion is timeless and ageless. Let's keep this conversation going and inspire each other to be the quiet heroes our world so often needs.